My brother's wedding invitation never came, so I took a trip instead. Mom said, only the people we actually love are invited. When the wedding fell apart over a debt, they begged for my help. But it was already too late. My name is Victoria Lambert. I'm 31 years old, and if you looked at my life from the outside, you'd probably think I had it all figured out. I'm a senior marketing director at a tech firm in Seattle, a world away from the perfectly manicured estates and country club politics of my childhood in Palo Alto, California. The Lambert name still carries weight in Silicon Valley circles. My father's venture capital firm funded half the unicorn startups you've heard of, but that world always felt like a gilded cage to me. My younger brother, Cameron, became the heir apparent my parents always wanted. The one who'd carry on the legacy, who'd make the right connections, marry the right person. Me? I was the daughter who left, who chose creative campaigns over board meetings, who picked authenticity over approval. I spent years convincing myself I didn't care about being the black sheep. But the truth? It still stung. And nothing prepared me for the day I realized I wasn't just being overlooked. I was being deliberately erased from my own brother's wedding. Has your family ever excluded you from something so important it felt like they were rewriting history without you in it? If that sounds familiar, maybe this story will help you understand you're not alone, and that walking away with your dignity intact is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. The call came on a Tuesday morning, wedged between a content strategy meeting and a coffee run. My phone buzzed with a name I'd come to associate more with holiday duty than genuine warmth. Mom. I answered, already preparing myself for the passive-aggressive small talk disguised as concern. Her voice was honey-smooth, almost too sweet. Darling, wonderful news. Cameron's getting married. The words hit harder than I expected, like hearing about a stranger who used to be your best friend. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced brightness into my voice. That's incredible, Mom. Really? Who's the lucky woman? Oh, you wouldn't know her, she said breezily. Penelope Ashford. Absolutely lovely girl, very refined. Her father and your dad have been business partners for years. Of course. Because Lamberts don't marry for love, we merge portfolios. I asked the obvious question. So when's the wedding? There was a pause. In my family, pauses are loaded weapons. They're still finalizing details. You know how these things are with busy families. I know exactly how weddings work. I've coordinated launch events with tighter timelines than most society weddings. But I played along, assuming I'd eventually get a save-the-date card. I didn't. What I got instead was a text from an old Stanford friend who still ran in Palo Alto circles. The message included a photo, my mother and Penelope's mother laughing over champagne, holding up fabric swatches, with hashtags like hashtag Ashford Lambert Wedding and hashtag June 2025. Another photo showed Cameron in a tuxedo fitting, my father beside him with that corporate merger smile plastered across his face. Still, no one had called me. I texted Cameron, "Hey, just saw some wedding posts online, so excited for you. Let's catch up soon." 8 hours later, he replied, "Thanks. Swamped right now. Talk later." I waited for later. It never came. It wasn't until I got a message from Jasmine Foster, a mutual friend from our private school days, that reality came crashing down. Just got Cam's save the date. June 14th at the Rosewood Estate. Please tell me you're coming. It's formal attire. I checked my mailbox. Nothing. I checked my email. Nothing. I even checked my spam folder like some desperate person hoping for a miracle. That night, I sat on my apartment floor surrounded by unpacked grocery bags and this crushing weight pressing down on my chest. I stared at my empty inbox like maybe, if I refreshed it enough times, the invitation would magically appear. That's when I knew. This wasn't an oversight. This wasn't some clerical error or lost mail. This was intentional. I poured myself a glass of Pinot Noir, stood by my floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, and let myself feel everything I'd been pushing down. The betrayal. The anger. The hollow ache of watching your own family close ranks without you. I wasn't just forgotten. I was erased. The flight from Seattle to San Francisco felt endless. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying memories in loops. Cameron and me building elaborate Lego cities, late-night raids on the kitchen after our parents' dinner parties, the time I taught him to drive stick shift because Dad was too busy closing deals to bother. All of it played like an old home movie, flickering and fading, underscored by one terrible truth. He chose this. When the plane touched down at SFO, I didn't bother checking into a hotel. I had my overnight bag, my phone at 15% battery, and a truth that demanded to be acknowledged face to face. Palo Alto was 45 minutes away. As the Uber wound through familiar tree-lined streets, past the Stanford campus where I'd once felt so free, that old familiar knot tightened in my stomach. The Lambert house looked exactly the same. The hedges trimmed with surgical precision. The bronze L on the front gate gleaming like new money pretending to be old. Everything picture perfect. Except this time, I wasn't expected. A catering van sat in the circular driveway. Through the massive windows, I could see servers in black setting up a long table with crystal stemware that probably cost more than my monthly rent. My mother stood near the marble fireplace, directing traffic like a conductor preparing for opening night. I rang the doorbell. A young server, college-aged, probably working for extra cash, opened the door. Her eyes flicked from my bag to my face. Before she could speak, I smiled politely and walked right past her. The moment I stepped into the dining room, time stopped. My mother froze mid-sentence, a champagne flute suspended in the air like a prop in a paused movie. My father looked up from a seating chart with the same expression he used when a junior analyst botched a pitch deck. And Cameron, my brother, my former best friend, sat at the head of the table beside a stunning blonde in an ivory blazer. He didn't stand. He didn't even look surprised. Victoria. My mother's voice could have cut glass. What are you doing here? I heard there was a family brunch, I said calmly. Thought I'd surprise everyone. The silence was suffocating. Penelope blinked, then slowly turned to Cameron. You have a sister. She didn't say it cruelly, just like someone discovering a plot twist they'd completely missed. Cameron said nothing. Let's talk privately, my mother said quickly, her hand clamping around my arm with the kind of force that only women who've perfected public appearances know how to deliver. She steered me toward my father's study like she was removing a stain before anyone could notice. Once inside, she closed the door with deliberate quietness and leaned against it. You were not invited for a reason, Victoria. I stared at her, waiting for whatever justification she'd invented. This wedding is important for both families. For the business. For the Ashfords. We didn't want complications. I'm your daughter. You were. Her voice was ice cold. But you made your choices. Seattle. Independence. That modern lifestyle. You don't represent what we need this event to reflect. There was a long, terrible pause. Then she looked me straight in the eye. This wedding is for people we actually love. The words didn't sting. Not immediately. They landed cold and quiet, like stones dropping into deep water. My father entered moments later, hands clasped behind his back like he was presiding over a board meeting. We've built a very specific image, Victoria. You've chosen not to be part of it. Don't ask us to pretend otherwise now. And Cameron? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He agrees with this. He does. Part of me still believed Cameron would show up. That he'd walk in and tell them they were wrong, that I mattered, that we were still siblings. So I waited. And he did walk in, shoulders tight, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the floor. Penelope didn't even know I existed, I said. Were you ever planning to tell her? He sighed like I was being unreasonable. It's easier this way. Easier? My voice cracked. Easier to pretend I don't exist. His silence was the answer. That's when I knew I was done begging for a seat at a table they'd already cleared of me. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out the front door into the crisp California air and ordered the first Uber I could find. If I was no longer part of their family, then maybe it was time I started building my own. Back in Seattle, I dropped my bag by the door and collapsed onto my couch without taking off my jacket. The silence felt heavier than usual, like the apartment itself had absorbed my disappointment and didn't know what to do with it. I stared at the ceiling, replaying my mother's words. This is for people we actually love. That sentence had severed something vital. Not because it surprised me, but because I'd spent most of my life pretending it wasn't true. I didn't cry. Not right away. That came later, in the shower when the water was scalding hot, and I couldn't tell if it was steam or shame rising around me. That night, I opened the top drawer of my desk and pulled out the envelope I'd labeled years ago, Family Fund. Inside was documentation for a savings account I'd been building since my first promotion. $26,000. Money I'd set aside for family milestones, anniversaries, weddings, emergency flights home. Hope, basically, itemized and earning interest. I'd imagined using it for Cameron's wedding. Flying in friends, maybe renting a beautiful guest house nearby so I could be fully present for his big day. The day I apparently wasn't invited to. Now I wanted it back. For me. The next morning, I called my best friend, Natasha. She answered on the first ring. I'm guessing the brunch was a disaster. You could say that, I said, staring out at the grey Seattle sky. They officially uninvited me. To my face. There was a sharp intake of breath. Vic, I'm so. My mother said the wedding is for people they actually love. Silence. Then, you know what I think? You've been trying to win their approval like it's some kind of achievement. What would happen if you just stopped? I didn't have an answer. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop. I typed, Best solo travel destinations for women starting over. Tuscany appeared on almost every list. Wine country, rolling hills, ancient villages where you could disappear into beauty and emerge transformed. I opened my bank account. $26,000 stared back at me like permission. The next 48 hours passed in a productive blur. Flight booked. Villa reserved in a small town outside Florence. Time off request submitted. I emailed my boss, Monica. Need to take personal leave. 2 weeks. Maybe 3. She replied within an hour. Take what you need. You've more than earned it. I didn't tell my family I was going. Why would I? They didn't tell me I wasn't invited. So I packed with intention, light but meaningful. A leather journal I'd never used. My vintage Nikon camera. The emerald dress I'd been saving for a special occasion. Before heading to the airport, I posted one thing to my Instagram story, a sunset quote. Sometimes the family you choose is worth more than the one you were born into. I turned off notifications and switched my phone to airplane mode. The journey was long, Seattle to JFK, then a 9-hour overnight to Rome, followed by a train to Florence. I barely slept. I read, journaled, watched strangers around me live their lives with ease. And when I stepped off that train into the Tuscan sunshine, breathing in the scent of espresso and old stone, I felt something shift inside me. Not healed. Not whole. But lighter. Let them plan their perfect wedding. I was planning my freedom. Tuscany wrapped around me like a warm embrace, golden light, endless vineyards, and a pace of life that felt almost rebellious in its slowness. The villa outside Montepulciano was perched on a hillside overlooking rows of grapevines that stretched toward the horizon like green waves. I spent my first 3 days doing what I hadn't done in years, absolutely nothing. No deadlines. No email notifications. No polite phone calls from people who thought love was a social obligation. I ate fresh bread and pecorino for breakfast, took long walks through olive groves, and let myself sleep until my body decided it was finished resting. I even smiled at strangers in the village, and they smiled back, genuinely, without agenda. By day 5, my phone was still off. I hadn't checked work email. I hadn't thought about Palo Alto beyond occasional, fleeting stabs of memory. I was finally breathing again. Until the villa's front desk called the room phone. Signorina Lambert? A woman named Dorothy called. She says she is your father's executive assistant. She insisted it was urgent. Something tightened in my chest. I thanked the clerk and reluctantly powered on my phone. 12 missed calls. A voicemail from Dorothy Palmer, my father's right hand for as long as I could remember. I listened. Miss Lambert, I hope this message finds you well. I've been asked to inform you that the wedding has been postponed indefinitely. That was it. No explanation. No context. Just a statement dropped like a bomb with no fallout plan. I blinked at the screen, then called Jasmine Foster, the only person I knew who still had connections to both my world and theirs. She answered breathlessly. Oh my God, Vic, are you sitting down? Apparently, for days before the wedding, Penelope's father received an anonymous tip. A deep background check revealed gambling debts, massive ones, in Cameron's name. Nearly $600,000. Sports betting, high-stakes poker, even loans taken out against Penelope's trust fund without her knowledge. It's a complete scandal, Jasmine whispered. The Ashfords are furious. They've pulled out entirely. Your parents are scrambling. Your dad refuses to cover the debts, says Cameron needs to face consequences. I sat on the edge of the bed, the white linen curtains billowing in the breeze. My pulse thundered in my ears. I should have felt vindicated. I didn't. I just felt hollow. Then the messages started flooding in. From my mother. Call us immediately. This is urgent. We need your expertise. From my father. Family crisis. Your professional skills are required. Respond ASAP. The irony was almost laughable. I wasn't invited to celebrate, but I was being summoned to clean up the mess, to protect the Lambert name, of course. I ignored every single message. Then came the call from Cameron himself. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. Vic. His voice sounded small, broken. I know I don't deserve to ask you for anything, but I need help. I'm drowning here. I said nothing. They're all cutting me off. The firm, the Ashfords, Mom, and Dad, they're using words like liability and embarrassment. I made mistakes. Bad ones. But you're the only one who can help me fix this. I closed my eyes. The voice on the other end was still my brother's, but softer, sadder, stripped of certainty. Why now? I asked quietly. Why is this the moment I become your sister again? Silence stretched between us. I didn't think it would go this far, he finally whispered. I thought I could handle it. I thought if I just followed the path they set out, everything would work. Even if that meant. He trailed off. Even if that meant pretending I didn't exist. He didn't answer. I'm not sending you money, Cameron, I said, my voice steady. And I'm not coming home to fix your mistakes. Not anymore. Vic, please. I already saved myself. You're going to have to figure out how to do the same. I hung up. And then I did something that surprised even me. I turned off my phone completely, walked down to the villa's front desk, and handed it to Marco, the kind-eyed manager who'd been checking on me each morning. Please keep this for 3 days. No matter what. He smiled gently. Of course, Signorina Victoria. Sometimes we need silence to hear ourselves. As I walked back up the stone path to my villa, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. You can't ghost me for years and expect me to sort through your wreckage. I woke the next morning without the usual weight pressing down on my chest. No buzzing phone. No unread messages. No inbox filling with guilt disguised as concern. Just bird song. The scent of lavender drifting through open windows. And a rare stillness in my body that felt almost foreign. Marco had kept his promise. My phone was nowhere within reach. And more importantly, nowhere within my reflexes. I made strong Italian coffee and carried it to the terrace, watching morning mist roll over the vineyards. For the first time since my mother told me I wasn't loved, I felt something else rising up, clarity. That morning, I asked Marco if he knew somewhere sacred, somewhere quiet. He grinned. I know exactly the place. He drove me through winding country roads to a small abbey tucked into the hills, San Galgano, a roofless medieval church open to the sky. Locals moved through it in quiet reverence, lighting candles, leaving flowers. This place, Marco said softly, it is for people who need to let go of heavy things. I walked through the grass-covered floor beneath the open arches, feeling centuries of prayer and release around me. I found a stone bench and sat down. One by one, I named them silently. My father, my mother, Cameron. I spoke memories I hadn't let myself touch in years. And then I whispered what I didn't expect. I release you. My voice cracked. The words felt fragile but true. I release the need to be enough for you. I release the version of me who kept begging to be seen. When I opened my eyes, I couldn't tell if my face was wet from tears or the light rain that had started falling through the open roof. But I felt lighter. After, Marco handed me his jacket and didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I returned to Seattle 3 days before the wedding was originally scheduled. The city greeted me with familiar drizzle and the sharp, clean smell of Puget Sound. My apartment smelled like eucalyptus from the diffuser Natasha had refreshed. The plants she'd watered were thriving, lush, green, alive. I stood by the window that evening, sipping chamomile tea and watching lights shimmer across the skyline. Somewhere on the California coast, the Ashford-Lambert wedding was supposed to be happening in a ballroom filled with orchids and old money. But there was no music, no vows, no carefully orchestrated merger of families. There was silence. And for the first time, that silence belonged to me. Over the next few weeks, I re-entered my life. Not the version I'd performed for survival, but the one I was finally choosing. I returned to work with a clarity I'd never felt before. Meetings were sharper. My instincts, stronger. Clients commented on my presence. Something had changed, they said. They were right. Then one afternoon, I received an email. Subject line, "Thank you." It was from Cameron. He wrote that he'd entered a treatment program for gambling addiction, that he'd moved out of our parents' house, that he was beginning to unpack the layers of who he'd become and why. "You were right to say no," he wrote. "You helped me more by not saving me. I'm not proud of how I treated you. I can't undo it. But I'm trying to understand it, and myself." No plea. Just acknowledgement. I replied 2 days later. "I'm glad you're getting help. I'm not ready for much more than this yet, but I appreciate the honesty. Take care of yourself, Cameron." Months passed. We started talking again, slowly, carefully. 1 call a week. Sometimes more, sometimes less. It was awkward at first. We were learning a new language together, built from scratch instead of the brittle scripts handed down by our parents. Then came Thanksgiving. I hosted it. Not in Palo Alto. Not in some ancestral estate with white linens and silent judgment. In my Seattle apartment. Mismatched chairs. Candlelight. A potluck spread that included butter chicken, cornbread stuffing, and way too much wine. Natasha brought homemade pumpkin pie and sunflowers. Oliver and Jordan arrived with cranberry sauce and terrible jokes. Priya came with her fiancé, both glowing. And then, 20 minutes after dinner started, Cameron walked in. He looked thinner, softer, not broken, but rebuilding. He handed me a bottle of wine and a small, hesitant smile. Didn't want to show up empty-handed. "You didn't," I said. And I meant it. Later that night, we stood on the balcony overlooking the city. The skyline glittered. Below us, laughter spilled from the living room. The warmth was real. "I never thought a holiday could feel like this," Cameron said quietly. "Like it's not a performance." "It's not," I said. "It's people who show up because they want to. That's the only kind of family that matters." He nodded. And we let the silence stretch between us, not uncomfortable, but whole. The truth is, family isn't built from obligation. It's forged in quiet moments when people choose you, again and again. I thought I needed to fight to belong in a house that never had room for me. Turns out, I just needed to build my own table.